surprise, I am with child. I'm pregnant. This announcement already feels so anticlimactic compared to the last, which is absolutely a good thing. If you haven't heard the story about my first pregnancy, I will link that video down below. But today I figured we'd catch up on a bit of everything because I absolutely dropped off the face of the earth through first trimester. It was very challenging. This pregnancy has been very different so far. So I put a question box up on my IG stories, and I love to see when you guys are nosy. Today we're going to talk about everything from trying to conceive, the changes I made to my routine, fertility, menstrual health irregularities, early pregnancy symptoms, what has been different. There is a whole range of topics. But before we get started, I would love for you to comment if there are any specific topics or content you'd like to see during this pregnancy, because we do have the benefit of finding out before 6 months. And I just feel so lucky that I'm going to get to experience and share more of this pregnancy.
One of your most asked questions has been, how did you work out during the first trimester? And my answer would be that I did not, because I was very sick, which we will talk more about later in today's video. But just because I was not sweating does not mean I was not losing fluids. And especially if you've got morning sickness, it is so important to ensure that you are staying properly hydrated, which thankfully does not just mean chugging a ton of water, because I was disgusted by plain water. Proper hydration is about having the right balance of fluids to minerals in your body. So a huge thank you to Element for sponsoring today's video and my hydration so far throughout this pregnancy. In case you haven't heard of Element, they make a science-backed blend of electrolytes that contains all of the minerals you need without any of the artificial sweeteners, ingredients, or sugars that you don't. I have been loving their lemonade salt flavor. It is a new limited time, I believe, flavor. So if you don't have a chance to get this, I would also recommend the citrus salt or the mango chili in the warmer weather. And they have done an offer for our community where when you shop via my link, they will also send you a sample pack to try all of their flavors for free. So if you happen to grab the lemonade salt, you can also try their other flavors in that sample pack. Go back, figure out what you want for your next order, however you want to do it. All of the info will be in the description box down below.
First up, how long did it take you to get pregnant? So I got pregnant on my first cycle. Now, there is some context that we'll circle back, but I debated sharing that because that's obviously not the case for everybody. I follow women on social media who've had to navigate IVF. I know people in real life who've struggled through infertility. I am lucky to not know the emotional and physical pain that comes with that journey. Of course, I do live a very healthy lifestyle, and there are changes that I've made to support my fertility, but there are also many other women who do those same things, who are working really hard and still struggle with infertility. I know there was a podcast somewhat recently that kind of blew up in my corner of the internet. It was all over my TikTok feed with people stitching it, and the host was kind of suggesting that pregnancy came down to vibes, and if you just stopped feeding into the negativity and fear mongering around infertility, you could manifest having a baby, which is kind of crazy. I didn't listen to the podcast in full. I'm not familiar with the host. I don't have the full context of the conversation. Maybe I'm giving too much benefit of the doubt, but I find it hard to believe that a woman would say that just to be controversial. And if I'm going to continue giving benefit of the doubt, I feel like I could kind of track her train of thought, because most of what I've seen online as a woman in the health and wellness space are stories of infertility rather than fertility. At the same time, though, understanding how social media works and what gets pushed in an algorithm, people love storytelling. They love to root for an underdog. They want to see you win. And there are many creators who document their journeys with infertility. On the flip side, with fertility, if you get pregnant immediately, that's not much of a story. I mean, personally, I would not like to know the intimate details of how you conceive. If you're consuming social media without that context or awareness, I can see how you would assume that infertility is the default. I even fell prey to this because part of why I was in such disbelief when I found out I was pregnant with Bean was because I'd only ever seen stories of infertility in the fitness industry. Women who looked like me, who maybe appeared outwardly healthy, but had spent years on hormonal birth control, using questionable supplements, maybe had restricted calories, consumed too much caffeine, pushed their bodies to extremes. They had struggled with infertility. And so if you go back and watch the video, you'll know there was a lot that contributed to me not knowing about Bean before 6 months. But when I was considering why my period was missing, pregnancy didn't even register as an option for me. Now, you guys didn't ask this, but this would be my follow-up question. If you got pregnant on your first cycle of trying, what did you do to prepare for conception? Which I'm also just going to acknowledge, the whole term of we're trying to get pregnant is absolutely disgusting. Turn something that should feel like sexy and just hold space for that with me. Gross, disgusting. So to give you some context, I worked very hard to regulate my cycle and understand my ebbs and flows, take care of my body after having Bean, because I did not want to have another unplanned pregnancy. And I also that was really eye-opening for me that I didn't actually understand much about fertility. So I worked very hard on that. I had her in October of 2022. From May 2024 to January 2025, I let that slip. And I know that sounds like a long time, but a lot of the changes that happened gradually. So I ran my first half marathon in May 2024. It was a huge accomplishment for me. I still feel so proud of how hard I worked and what I accomplished, and I still love running. After that high, I was already chasing the next. I wanted to run further, faster. My goal was to PR my half marathon time in October at the other big half marathon that we have in Toronto, which I thought at the time would have been realistic because it would have given me about a month to decompress, then a 16-week training cycle to ramp back up again. Now, summer did not go as planned, and for honestly the best reasons possible. We did a lot of traveling, we spent a lot of time with friends. Jeff got back into playing sports, and through all of that, of course, we still had to work as well as navigate how to be parents with a much more active and walking toddler, because the previous summer she would have been walking, but she was not as active as she was then. So I wasn't sleeping enough, I wasn't eating enough, I wasn't recovering enough to keep up with the mileage and intensity of that training. Which in hindsight, the signs were definitely there because my menstrual cycle was getting longer, my symptoms were getting worse. Flash forward to fall 2024. I decided to pull out of running the half and switch to the 5K because I figured it would be less stressful for me to pull out of running the half entirely rather than to risk running a race where I knew I would not be at my best performance and then feeling really disappointed. End of year is the busiest time for us with the ANDA app because you go right from Black Friday into holiday into New Year's marketing campaigns. All the while, we were also managing a rebrand and coordinating a pretty large-scale launch event that we couldn't tell anyone about. So it was very busy. I still was not getting enough sleep. I still was not eating enough despite scaling back on my run training. And I actually ended up losing my period through November and December. I continued taking pregnancy tests. I never got a positive, but that was definitely a wake-up call that what I was doing was not healthy. So I took stock of everything I'd been doing. And of course, there will always be those non-negotiables, those things that can't budge, your responsibilities. But I did pretty much stop running. I switched to just doing my 3 full body workouts per week. I also significantly cut back on caffeine. I limited myself to just having one coffee in the morning. And if I didn't have it in the morning, then it was going to be nothing. And then I prioritized sleep quality, which started with setting better boundaries around my nighttime routine. One bad habit that I'd kind of slipped into was continuing to work away on my laptop after we'd put Bean to sleep. But when I really took stock of what I was getting done at night, I realized most of that work was being done distracted. It was not super efficient. And I was doing it out of a place of, I don't know, scarcity or guilt for maybe not being more productive as compared to my pre-motherhood self. I don't know. The nighttime work was not rooted in productivity or good feelings. And I realized it was actually contributing toward having a harder time falling asleep. So I shifted that computer work I'd been doing to early mornings when I had more energy, when I had more clarity before the day got going. And that had a huge impact on me. I got my period back in January, exactly around the same timing it was expected to arrive. My symptoms were very normal. There was really nothing unusual about it. It's like it just started back up again. And then I ovulated exactly when I should have in February, and I got pregnant exactly when I expected to, which was kind of crazy. I don't think running is inherently bad for your hormone health or fertility, but in the way I was doing it, where I really wanted to push the limits of my performance without necessarily having the lifestyle, time, or habits in place to allow for sufficient recovery, that was not healthy. And I had to make the realization that maybe that level of performance is not for this season of motherhood. But I also feel grateful for the wisdom, I guess, that comes with a second time pregnancy, and knowing that, okay, it might not be right now, but I'm going to get through this pregnancy. I'm so grateful for my fertility, and my time will come again. How did you deal with nausea? Honestly, I didn't, because I had no nausea with my first pregnancy, especially comparing symptoms. They were basically non-existent. I mean, I didn't know I was pregnant for 6 months. So when you really put that into perspective, if there were symptoms during my first pregnancy, they were so minimal that I easily chalked them up to other things. So when I started experiencing this, I didn't know what to expect. I mean, for one, I didn't know that morning sickness could happen at any time of day. It could even last all day, as was the case for me. I didn't know how long it would last. There wasn't any rhyme or reason to it. Right when it felt like I'd figured something out, I would get triggered by something else, and it could really be the most random things that would make me feel sick, like looking at a screen, the smell of deodorant. So I was walking around deodorant free for quite a while. Thankfully, I wasn't doing a lot of sweating. Even certain sounds or textures, like this actually sounds so crazy, but everything made me feel sick. While I knew prescription meds were an option, looking back, I don't even know my thought process around it. Maybe I wasn't thinking clearly because I was just feeling so sick, because I'm by no means against taking medicine when you need it. It's that need it part that I think I was stuck with, because I felt like I was being a wimp. This was kind of my first trimester, because I wasn't really presently consciously aware I was pregnant for the last. And statistically, most women experience some form of morning sickness. So I just assumed that everyone else had my experience. And by my understanding, not everyone gets the prescription. I tried the anti-nausea bracelets. I tried eating smaller meals, plainer foods, all of the standard advice you see online. And it did not work. It really didn't make a difference for me. Some of the things actually made my nausea worse. What did help, and understand that when I say help, the relief these things provided was very temporary, very minimal, but I was happy with any difference we could get. I switched to a prenatal that had a higher dose of vitamin B6, as well as one that just had no iron at all, because what I realized was that the iron in the prenatal I'd been taking before was backing me up. And so I was pretty much going between throwing up, and then being backed up. And it was just a terrible feeling. I felt like I was being punished by my body for anything that I ate. Sleep was the only time that I felt closer to being at peace. I would often wake up feeling dizzy, like I was on a cruise ship below deck or hungover or something. But most nights I was sleeping for 10 to 12 hours, really as long as I could handle staying in bed. And movement. If I could bring myself to exercise, the nausea would often subside. Now, getting myself to the place to move my body was very challenging, because even though I knew the nausea would often go away for a little bit, it was a tough sell. I did not follow any sort of structured routine. It was really just doing whatever I could manage. So I did a lot of walking. I did some gentle weightlifting, nothing high intensity or high impact. And I found that the nausea would often subside within maybe 10 minutes of starting. It would go away during the workout, and then that effect would last maybe another 10 to 15 minutes after the workout. But again, when it's compared to just feeling sick all day long, I was willing to take any relief I could get. How did you know you were ready to have another baby? Originally, I thought I would reach a point in time, a milestone or an age gap where I just woke up feeling different. And I would always save the videos I saw on TikTok where people would be talking about the ideal age gap and discussing in the comments. And I did learn, I gained a lot of insight scrolling those comment sections, but I wouldn't say it was an unhealthy obsession, though it did definitely get to the point of being an unhealthy fixation on age gaps, because I did not feel ready immediately after having a baby. In hindsight, I can now say I had a pretty tough postpartum mentally. And so as we passed each of those age gaps and I still didn't feel ready, it made me more anxious, which then contributed to feeling even less ready and also feeling guilty for not feeling ready when I thought I should feel ready. Mid last year, we weren't trying. I still didn't think I was ready. I was still taking pregnancy tests religiously because I liked having that second layer of security, and in addition to getting my period, just to know that I for sure was not pregnant. But there was definitely a shift in me, because rather than seeing relief when I saw that negative, I felt a little sad, right? Like I said before, my cycles were getting longer around that time because of the running and just all of the things, all of the stressors on my body. And so when I was taking those pregnancy tests, I did logically expect and hope to see a negative, but there was also something brewing inside me that thought, maybe it might not be so bad to have a surprise baby. And what started as a joke between me and Jeff, when my period would be a little late, over analyzing little changes to my body, like maybe that bloating is actually it's implanting and the baby's forming whatever it needs to form to be healthy and happy. What started as a joke turned into me just being kind of sad with each cycle passing. So we eventually had the conversation of, what would it mean to be ready to have another baby? And the more we talked about it, the more I realized that these things that I built up to be obstacles were actually kind of fuzzy. There weren't actually a lot of things that I could pinpoint as reasons that I wasn't ready for pregnancy. And a lot of them are actually rooted in fear. I mean, fear of the unknown, fear of life-changing, fear of another challenging postpartum journey. But the fear of those obstacles did not outweigh our desire to have another baby. And that is how I confidently knew I was ready. How does pregnancy affect your mental health? My instinct is to say not great, but at the same time, my first pregnancy was unplanned. And so there was a lot of anxiety being thrust into a situation before I felt like I was ready. This pregnancy has been very different in the sense that I was planning to be pregnant. I expected to be pregnant. And so I'd already made that mental adjustment. That said, you can't anticipate everything. There are many things that you cannot control in pregnancy and many feelings that while you may have anticipated, just might not feel the way that you thought they would feel. The first trimester nausea was very difficult, not only physically, but mentally, because I had such a diminished capacity to work, to parent, to just be present in life. I felt like I was a passenger in my own body for 8, 9, maybe 10 weeks. I needed so much sleep to the point that we'd put Bean down to bed, then I'd be saying goodnight to Jeff at like 7 p.m. So already as parents, it's hard to spend time together, but I truly had no time with him. I just felt like a whiny and complaining burden, which are my words, not his. In some ways, it felt like early postpartum because the experience was so all-encompassing that I did feel like I lost parts of my identity, and there wasn't necessarily an end in sight. And even thinking about what I just said, I'm not doing the full range of feelings or the full context of feelings justice, because had it not been for being so sick through the first trimester, I would not have gained the clarity that I did on my priorities or the confidence setting boundaries had I not been forced to slow down and step back and see that life did not fall apart when I did that. There were actually very good people in my life who stepped up to support me. Had that not happened, then I would not have gained the trust that I now have in the timing of my journey and in the support of my community. My best advice would be that pregnancy is going to challenge you. It is going to be a journey emotionally, and the best thing you can do is to set yourself up with the support that you need for when it gets challenging. Do you worry about 2-kid dynamics? No. I hope I'm interpreting this right. I am interpreting this as making the transition from 1 to 2, because there is always a debate of which transition is hardest, going from 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, or more kids. Obviously, I can't see the future. Maybe 1 to 2 will be an absolute dumpster fire. But based on the age gap that Bean and the new baby will have, knowing that she will be potty trained, able to communicate out of the house most of the day, I imagine that that will give me the space that I feel like I need to adjust to having a second baby. But I think this really depends on the person and on the parents and on the lifestyle that you had before having kids. Because for us, the adjustment from 0 to 1 was significant. We had to completely change our work habits, our workout habits, our time management, how we scheduled time with each other and friends. We had to become a lot more intentional about every aspect of life. And every time there was a developmental milestone or change, it's like we were right back to square one again. And it was hard to anticipate. Becoming parents made us a lot more resilient, improved our communication, and forced us to mature not only in our relationship, but also as individuals. So maybe I'm naive, but knowing that we've already made that mindset and lifestyle shift, the way I'm anticipating this transition from 1 to 2 is more just time management and logistics. I'm gonna cut us off there because I could just yap about this all day long. I have so much more confidence and trust in myself, my own opinions, going into becoming a second-time mom, and I really do love talking about it because I know I would have found this helpful when I was pregnant with Bean. But let me know if you did enjoy this video, if you want more Q&As. Again, like I said at the start, if there is particular pregnancy content or topics you want to dive into, I would love to. I am so excited that I'm going to get to share more of this journey with you. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part of this community. And I can't wait to continue this journey.